My question is, do you think we are prepared to grab these opportunities or the low-hanging fruit that you said? Or will we have an equally long missed opportunities list in 2047? And what is it that we the people have to do? And I'll keep the political science out of it. But what do you think we the people have to do to ensure that this list is much shorter in 2047? And then we'll get on to other questions.
You see, I think I link this to where real power rests. And I am one of those who from the very beginning am a firm believer in the fact that the change doesn't come from bottom up. Real change always comes from top down. From the bottom up, you can bring out issues, you can even have street protests, you can have a lot of things. But the real change, forced or otherwise, as was the liberalization, some say forced, some not, but it has to come from top down. Now, who has the real power top down? President doesn't have any power, we know that already. Prime Minister has immense power. But I just want to say this, people don't realize the power that our Supreme Court has. Yes, they say that if the Parliament doesn't agree with the Supreme Court, you can overturn the Supreme Court judgment. But there have been thousands of Supreme Court judgments. How many of them have been overturned? Half a dozen. And all of them, barring one, have been done by the Congress. Shah Bano is the one that comes most prominently to mind. Bank nationalization, in case many of you would know, one of the greatest Indians who was part of the Swatantrata Party, Rustam ji, who took the case to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court sided with him, annulled the bank nationalization of Indira Gandhi, and then overnight Indira Gandhi overturned the Supreme Court judgment, and we are back to, having loss-making PSU banks at the beck and call of ministers who would say, isko loan do, and this will not change. We have the NPAs totaling, I think, 8 or 9 lakh crores. We can manage books and then kind of show that this is loan, this is whatever it is. So what I would say is that Supreme Court has more power because the government might be irritated by a Supreme Court decision, but 90% of the time it goes along with it. But what happens when the Supreme Court does not want to bring in the change, as was the case in the farm reforms? Yes. What do you do then? You can't do anything. You can't.
I have a follow-up question to that, but we'll take that up
and
after.
Just to add 30 seconds to that. I'll tell you why it's important. Because people have to realize that the most successful economies, they actually very closely mirror Darwinian evolution. It is collecting mutations, adapting. Adaptation is the heart of survival. Now, when you have 44% of your 515 million labor force involved in a sector that is giving you only 12 to 13% of GDP, being archaic, in the West, only 2 to 3% of its labor force is involved in agriculture. Here we have 44%. It is telling you that bulk of our labor force is inflexible. That is why you have these farmer suicides. That is why you have crops going bad. That is why there is no insurance. That is why nobody wants to do that job, and yet 250 to 300 million people are doing it. Why couldn't the Supreme Court see this? It could read it. That's the tragedy. Swaminathan Committee, 16 years ago, told exactly what Supreme Court and any sane person must do. Supreme Court could read all those things, even its own report that said 82% of farmers are for it. But it did not implement it.
So then I'll go with my question and then we'll take the next one. Then, sir, do you think, amongst these list of big missed opportunities, the collegium and the judicial reforms were one of the biggest ones, because that would possibly have solved some of this, maybe not today, maybe not in the next year, but over a period of time. Do you think is that one of the solutions? And
I support the reforms, judicial reforms, definitely. But I don't think that is at the core of it, even though politicians increasingly are kind of using it as a stick to beat the judiciary with. Because the fact of the matter is, I'd much rather have the judges choose people amongst themselves than a politician meddling in it. And we've seen how our own history have told us how so many of the Supreme Court judges were directly chosen by Indira Gandhi. In fact, one of them, and this anecdote is real, comes from the fact of a book called Supreme Whispers, written by none other than Chandrachud. That a Bombay High Court judge, I forget his name, was to be elevated to Supreme Court. But at the last moment, Indira Gandhi took out the name. Why? Because he attended the funeral of RSS Golwalkar. So when you have politicians deciding on such things, I'd much rather the judges decide. I know it's not ideal, but certainly it needs tinkering. I am always for merit-based selection procedure. I mean, I would be horrified if in this, no one amongst here is going to choose a member of the company based on, something which is not to do with merit, because ultimately the company would suffer. You realize it, it's as stark. So why don't the judges realize it? So,
thankfully, we've not had another episode of superseding judges in the Supreme Court. So with that, we'll just move on to...
As that was the stark example, Justice Khanna.
Yep.
He was the only one who went against Indira Gandhi and the emergency, and he was superseded. Yeah.
We can just, yeah.
Sure.
Yes.
We'll just start from forward and take it backward.
And Anaga, if I could just request to just once more introduce yourself so that doctor knows who he is speaking with, and then ask the question.
And I've always said, people have asked me, are any questions off limits? I said, absolutely none, as long as none of my answers are off limit to you.
My name is Ramakrishna Nishtla. The question that I have is, today it's election season, and we are reading every second day about freebies. Freebies
Yes.
are very much there. In fact, the Congress has come out with a long list of freebies which they want to give. And we are seeing in the neighboring state where Jagan Mohan Reddy is also doing something very similar. And all this seems to be at the cost of future generations, leading to bankruptcy. But what is the way out in this? Because politicians are there to win elections and form governments. And maybe people are also to blame to some extent, because they're quite happy to take the freebies and say the future generations can fend for themselves. So what do you think is the way forward, Dr. Ranganathan?
It's a very difficult question to answer. Not because I don't want to answer it. Of course, I've answered it before. And in fact, it is a fallacy that people believe that a lot of other parties give, we seem to be really good at two things, making babies and freebies. But like I say, Indians have always been given two choices, past or pasta. But the fact of the matter is that BJP gives freebies the same, if not more, than every other party. I mean, for crying out loud, they even offered in Nagaland free trips to Jerusalem for Christians if they voted for BJP. Ram Mandir tab nahi aaya unko yaad, Jerusalem yaad aaya. Every party is doing it. Congress. What is the solution? The solution can come from a non-political entity, i.e., again, a court. But then I ask you, what defines a freebie? Is welfare state freebie? Somebody can say, well, if you're giving Ayushman Bharat, if you're giving tapped water connection, if you're giving gas cylinder, is that not freebie? So we have to categorize and find out what is freebie and what isn't freebie. And that's not a very easy exercise. Because somebody will come along and say, you opened a Jan Dhan account for me. The cost of it was incurred by the government. You gave me one free cylinder. You giving me free Ayushman Bharat thing. I put to you gave me Kisan Samman Nidhi. You giving me free scholarships. You giving me free education for the girl child. Are these not freebies? What would I say? I don't have an answer to that. So, is welfare state a freebie? And I would say to a very large extent it is. So this problem is like a Newtonian three-body problem. It's almost intractable. The only way we can solve it logically is we would never be able to stop politicians from talking about freebies, is by running socialism, which is welfare state, through capitalism. Welfare state is only possible in a capitalist state. We have to realize it. Socialism cannot fund welfare state. And India has to have a welfare state at least till 2047. We have to give free education, almost free health for the prosperity, because we've seen that. We've seen the dramatic reduction in infant mortality rate and maternal mortality rate from 1991 to what it is now. Dramatic, 1,000% decrease. So as we get more healthier, we will be more productive, we will contribute more to the economy, we will be less malnourished, and all those would take state intervention. Is that freebie? Yes, it is. How do we solve it?
Yeah, I'm Brahmanand.
Yeah.
My question is on agriculture.
Yeah.
In fact, it is a very challenging on the one side, sensitive on the other side, the farmers being what it is. If you are the, let's say, Prime Minister, what you could have done to solve this problem? Because the same problem which you explained,
Yes.
what you could have done? Because unfortunately, courts are not supported in that case, but you as a Prime Minister could have, what you could have done?
Right. So, I would have lasted less than a day if I was a Prime Minister. You guys only wouldn't have voted for me, including some of my family members also. ये इसको क्या वोट देना? वो एक free साड़ी दे रहा है, उसको वोट कर देते हैं. But I would have done implemented those schemes immediately. I would have resigned than to have repealed them. B, I would have from day one itself ensured that most of the farmers were insured. You cannot run an enterprise where 95% of the workforce is not insured. It's crazy. 70% of irrigation water for Indian agriculture comes from monsoon. You have one failed monsoon and you're down on the dumps. You have to have insurance. And I've also calculated this. The insurance, it is cheaper than the compensation that the government pays when the crop fails or a flood comes. It's cheaper. So these are all the steps, and I'll tell you, and I've told you about the tragedy of the farm bills. Let me tell you how the tragedy of the vested interests and this question, sir, that I was talking about, that there ought to be more journalism in science, as I was saying. India is the world's second largest producer of sugarcane. Second largest. We produce to the tune of 350 billion kilograms of sugarcane. Sugarcane requires only 9% of the arable area, but 77% of the irrigation water. The amount of water, and I've calculated this so that you don't have to, the amount of water required to make 350 billion kilograms of sugarcane is equivalent to 1 quadrillion liters. Quadrillion. I didn't even know this phrase existed. I hadn't gone beyond billions. I mean, some of you did. You know, what happens after billion? Gazillion or 1 quadrillion? To give you an estimate, that's the amount of water that is present in 10 Ganga Sagar dams. That is the amount of water we are using for sugarcane every year. And the sugar prices, they have halved in the last 6 years. And the politicians, they are proud to increase the MSP equivalent of sugarcane. It happened in UP during UP elections. They put it in their manifestos. We are proud to have doubled or 1.5 times the amount of MSP equivalent we give to our sugarcane farmers. One politician dared to change that. It was Mr. Fadnavis when he was the chief minister, I think 4 years ago, in Maharashtra. He said, if you want to start a sugarcane farm, you have to take permission of the government. And that was beautiful because you know how it is. To take the permission of a government is like you would say, I'll grow something else but not sugarcane. But within a week, he took that order back. Why? Because one very influential politician who's got India's second highest award, he said, take this back. Why? Because one of the byproducts of sugarcane is molasses, and molasses is used in the liquor industry. So in 10 years from now, we won't have water to drink, but we'll have old monk. Now, is that not crime, sir, I ask you? It is daylight robbery. What are we? It is sanctioned. That's the tragedy.
Doctor, I'll just ask one question and then we can move on to the next one. And on this topic, is you called it victory of anarchist, and has this set a precedent? And that's my fear. Do you think if a set of people could do it and get a law rolled back and not really, what you said didn't happen, which is I would have tendered my resignation rather than roll it back. Does it give courage to others to say we can also do and pull off something like this?
Oh, it started happening already. And I dare say it happened even before the farm reforms. India was the world's one of the largest producer of copper. Sterlite plant was closed. Within a day, we became net importer. These things happen all the time. I mean, I gave you the example of Narmada.
Right.
So many things. But what is dangerous is when the Supreme Court also succumbs to it. That is danger. Danger is not politicians have been taking U-turns ever since politics became the world's second oldest profession. Is it second oldest or the oldest? I don't know. But so I don't care about the politicians. What was scary was that the courts did not act. And the case of 26th January when the tricolour was taken out from the Red Fort.
Yes.
117 people were charged. The government took back all those cases. It is anarchy. We have to accept it. When Ambedkar gave that landmark speech that this nation would from here on not be under the influence, or our history will not be written, our future will not be written in the grammar of anarchy. Such beautiful, impactful phrase, grammar of anarchy. But I'm afraid we started writing not only our future but our history as well with grammar of anarchy.
Slightly different question, probably. See, competition is the bedrock of any capitalist society where prosperity comes through. Companies compete with each other. Do you think the states in India could get into this competition to be, leading into, saying a Karnataka or a Tamil Nadu or a Maharashtra, trying to be number one, number two? And do you think a trend towards that where more powers, more taxes in their hands for the development of the state? Today, probably what, let's say, Tamil Nadu or a Maharashtra contributes to the exchequer goes to some states which do not deserve it. Yeah. Do you think a Teutonic shift to that extent would catapult India to a future which our children will be proud in 2047?
No, so absolutely, and I think it already happens to a very large extent. I mean, the pharma industry setting up base in Himachal has a lot to do with the tax incentives that were given to the pharma industry by that state. So every state does it. But my fundamental issue is actually dogmatic. I don't want the state to be involved at all. If it is possible, the state should get out of. I mean, we can perfunctorily keep electing the politicians. कि भाई आप elect हो गए 5 साल तक कुछ करो. But don't meddle in affairs where national wealth is concerned. Because I'll tell you what will happen when you talk about the tax wealth going to the state. Now that itself is problematic to me, because the moment a state becomes richer and richer and richer, all it means is that some of its politicians or the ruling dispensation are becoming richer and richer and richer, And politicians who made their money through capitalism always gravitate towards socialism because they know that as the nation becomes poorer, they will become richer. We've seen it in Pakistan, we've seen it in a lot of neighboring countries, That is when feudalism comes in, and that is the real danger. So I don't want the state to be involved in everything. I mean, if you really want the state to give incentives, then let there be organizations like FICCI or some other industry organizations who go and talk to industrialists, who hold these melas, and who manage to get MOUs and investment into the state. I don't want a minister. It is not a minister's job. I never wanted. So the Prime Minister promised maximum, I've even forgotten that phrase, what it was, like 2 pigs flying, maximum governance, minimum government. We might have had good governance, but we've had maximum government. There are 80 or 85 odd ministries. Ministry of Shipping, Ministry of Fishing, Ministry of Statistics, Ministry of Program Implementation. Why the hell would you need a ministry for that? Shouldn't the finance ministry be implementing programs that it should be responsible for implementing them correctly, and no one else should have except the Prime Minister or the Council of Ministers, to have a probing eye on it? So, you give an IT ministry, shipping ministry, There should not be a ministry of civil aviation. There should not be a ministry of railways. So I am for, have regulations. So don't go completely, on the Reagan, this thing that you remove all regulations, but don't involve the government if you can risk it.
And once I hear you, I think, I can't help but think that in that sense, GST is a very good regulation.
Yes.
Only on this limited point,
Yes.
because it does take away the powers of the state to decide these tax rates and things, and to that extent, it reduces the point you made on corruption as well, because
Yes.
today, no state can reduce tax on a particular item, which was possible in VAT days or even sales tax earlier.
Yes.
So to that extent, GST, I think, does solve some of what you've just
Certainly.
highlighted.
So I think, you see, what is the mythological figure? I think Vishnuji changed to woman, and, I forget the name. Mohini, wonderful name. Like that, corruption is also changing. The aspect of corruption is changing, So when you say with increasing, and believe me, when mid-80s, we are all children of 80s and 70s, some very few of the 50s and 60s here. But we remember, in fact, the Communist Party of India organized a large-scale protest decreeing computerization. Yes. When computers came in the mid-1980s, there were people on the streets. That railway ticket reservations, we will not allow, So for every progress, there is, because people are scared, and I was talking to Sir, the other day, we are ironically going to go back to, and, he's involved in artificial intelligence. Now, it's great that it is happening. But then, you remember the 1950s, the film Naya Daur, where Dilip Kumar fought with mechanization in those days. It was between Tonga and a tractor, and he won, and we felt so happy. This battle is coming. Jobless growth. Why do we need AI? Why do we need robotics when we have our demographics tells us that 60% of India is 25 years old? Where is you are encouraging unemployment? These battles will come, and politicians will succumb to them. Trust me. Otherwise, they will lose. So these are the things that we need to worry about.
My question is regarding dams.
Yeah.
See, I read somewhere that in United States they are decommissioning the dams, and then they are allowing the rivers to flow in their natural course.
Yeah.
But looking at India, going on our requirements, we need dams. We need linking. But how do we balance that? Will it not reproduce same problems for India also?
Yes. So I hope you didn't read it in New York Times, but the motto should be all the news that is unfit to print. But you're true. This is a problem. But this is not a problem that has plagued the dam builders for 20 years, 30 years. There is, in any decision that a government or a human being makes, any decision, it is based on cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, society as we know it would crumble. There is always a cost-benefit analysis in everything we do. You talk of, for example, cigarette smoking. We talk of cigarette smoking, it is banned at some places. But diesel that produces pollution, we haven't banned it because there is cost-benefit analysis somebody has done that, look, it pays for a society to have motorized transport. It is safer. It is better for, so many things like that. So many. I mean, and every decision is based on cost-benefit analysis. So the cost-benefit analysis of, for example, Narmada Dam, and I gave you the statistics. You talk to an NGO environmentalist who believe that unlike Einstein, E is equal to rubbing stone square, they would say that stop building dams. But on the other hand, you see the near-term advantages that building or raising the height of Narmada Dam has given us to millions of people. It has increased the agricultural produce. It has transformed that state. But yes, silting is a problem. It is an issue. But then energy generation also is an issue. You know, we have to look at all these issues, but every decision has to be on the basis of cost-benefit analysis. Otherwise, society would crumble.
Sir, just to extend on
Please. Yeah.
Dr. CTO has given an advice long back to connect Brahmaputra to the Godavari or Krishna.
Yes.
And he has given prepared the blueprints and given all that.
Correct.
But why that has not been at least started to some extent?
Yes.
For example, Brahmaputra connected to Bihar,
Yes.
it has solved a lot of problems.
Yeah.
Odisha will have a lot of dry dams.
Yes.
Is there any electrical holding us really?
Sir, the only thing holding is that you are not the Chief Justice of India. Because you're absolutely right. It is criminal. And I gave you the example. In which world are we living in where 63% of our usable water is wasted? I mean, I told you about the sugarcane crime. This, I would say, is a bigger crime. We are a country of accumulating crimes. What to do? River linking should be a priority. Absolute. The Ken Betwa link is there. And Chandrababu Naidu, when he was the chief minister, he started to link a couple of rivers, but then he was removed, and then, that project is in limbo. We should, and because I wrote on it, I have seen the Supreme Court report. It's unbelievable. And in its alacrity, in its intelligence. And it talks of something as momentous as the Panama Canal. Before the Panama Canal, you needed to circumnavigate the whole South America. So one of the greatest engineering projects that humankind has ever undertaken is the Panama Canal. River linking would be as advantageous as that, but as I said, these are solutions that have been there for decades. Yeah.
Anand, this is Ramoji from Manipal. My question is again on the farm laws and what we have. You listed out few missed opportunities. Obviously, this is the one which all of us can relate. Things like, your vaccine, herb and all, most of us do not understand, at least I don't understand that. Now, coming back to formulas, I think my good friend has asked a question, you have given the solution also. He asked you, if you were the PM, what you would do? And you said you would resign. I think that is not desirable answer for us. Now, see, when we know that 82% of the people liked it, and like I just said, the same anarchy if we take, why no force could come forward to support that?
Yeah.
Is it, if the biggest political party on the earth and having, tons of money with it, if that cannot organize, who can do that?
Yeah.
And who will stand for those 82%, farmers who liked it and who would have got huge benefit out of it?
No, sir, and I hinted towards a possible solution, which is a class action suit that farmers and other people in the society who are aggrieved with it. On the day, I remember I was on television and on the day the farm bills were repealed, and I asked these pertinent questions, including the one where when the Prime Minister said, मैंने ये किसानों के लिए farm bills लाया था और देश हित में वापस ले रहा हूँ, मैंने कहा I'm sorry, देश हित था कि आप farm bills लाए. आप बताइए आप क्यों वापस ले रहे हैं? जो 300 million farmers हैं, उनका नुकसान हुआ है, उसकी भरपाई करिए. But sir, forget about compensating those farmers and their thing. All those lakhs of small businesses that suffered 3,000 crores economic loss, not for a day, a week, a month, but a year. Who compensated them? And so many, I know directly of friends who had their businesses concerns at the border. They went bankrupt. They said they've switched businesses, godowns, warehouses. Who paid? Who compensated? No one. So sometimes it's very, sir, it's very disheartening, to be honest with you, And I think, and that is the reason why we are also a quote-unquote spiritual country. Thank God for that. Because sometimes the only recourse, and that is why if I was not a Darwinian atheist, the closest that I would be that comes to is Jainism. And I would be a Jain monk, I would pluck my hair and go on take a kavadiya or something and just renounce the world. And that is one question that, we were discussing. The economic wealth of a nation by which we define prosperity and happiness, GDP, is dependent upon consumerism. Nobody wants to make a phone that will last 15 years. You remember 50s and 60s, you would take pride in the fact that you held a consumer good that lasted 20 years, 30 years. Now, your own CFOs to begin with would possibly sack you. He says, what the hell are you talking about? I need a new product next year. The world is running on consumerism. And it's not just gadgets where you still have, there is logic behind a new iPhone because technology is changing. It is about clothes as well. It's about every entity. It's about books. It's about new marketing. And I'll tell you that if you might think that this is new, philosophically, the history of it is so old and it is so beautiful, and you would recognize it, that the guy who first thought of it was actually Gerald Ford. He, of course, of the great fame of assembly line. And his Model T was working wonders and company was making millions and billions. Then he collected his engineers and he said, you go to all the junkyards where Model T has been junked, and you find out which is the spare part or the part of the Model T that is as good as new. Go and do it. So they went in this enormous exercise, laborious exercise. They went to so many junkyards and they collated some were junked and some were rusted. They said, sir, this axle rod of Model T is as good as new. And they said, it's brilliant. And they said, rubbish. A, you are sacked, and B, he told his engineers, make sure that this axle rod does not last over and above the Model T. Make sure it does not last. And that is the beauty of evolution. What is the point of having a part of your body that will, overlast you? And that is how economics and economists think. That is why you have this twitching urge to buy a new phone, even though the old phone is working perfectly all right, a new television, a new suitcase, a new pair of shoes. If you don't do that, you are not categorized as wealthy. But you talk to a Jain monk, he's renounced everything. You have diamond merchants who are Jains, and 9 Lives by, or was it Maximum City, Suketu Mehta's. The last chapter is sensational. It talks about a billionaire diamond merchant Jain monk who is having this whole event where he's going to renounce the world, and his family is crying, and this whole procedure, you're not supposed to meet your family ever again. You just keep on walking, and you take only non-plucked fruit as your thing. It's incredible. So where does India balance? And I was asking this to this gentleman, This is something that we have to answer. And, I have been mostly very aggrieved about the things that are wrong. And I just need to close my eyes, and we are really blessed. I just need to pretend that I'm a Jain monk and all I have are my possessions of one langot and that's it. And I can walk off. But isn't that the essence of life? Because life is through chance. There is no purpose to life. There could be purpose to livelihood or living. But we are all products of thunder and lightning and water and ammonia. And, Miller demonstrated that in 1953 when he had this round bottom flask and he put some, voltage across it. And what he gained from that water through that electronic discharge were actually amino acids and nucleic acids. Through that, of course, and through Jacques Shostak, who developed protocell, through William Stimmer, who talked about sexual PCR and adapting to mutations. There really is no purpose to life. But, I talk like, and ironically, I'm talking this to a bunch of people who want us to become wealthier and wealthier and wealthier as fast as we can, rightly so, rightly so. Because I'm talking about this after I have become relatively wealthy, you know. This kind of talk, a farmer or someone who's at the lower economic strata doesn't have time to talk about because he's concerned about, where his next meal is going to come from.
Two more questions. Okay.
Good evening, I'm Srinivas here.
Yeah, hi, Sri.
I have a comment, Doctor, and I'd like to hear your views on it. Across the last maybe decade or a little more, as I talk to people, well-educated people in corporates, I'll make a disclaimer, none of them are finance people. But what I'm seeing is that people are getting lost in the optics of what this country is doing. Oh, we're going to be 5 trillion, we're going to be this, we're going to be that. Nobody's actually getting into the details. Nobody's talking about we still have a malnutrition problem, children are still stunted. They're getting washed away by the so-called PPT presentations that they're seeing, and they're not getting into it. And to me, that's a very dangerous trend, because if the so-called intelligentsia of this country is not opening their eyes to what lies beneath the surface, I think that's a problem for the society.
Yeah.
By the educated class, that's a problem, because they're getting swayed more by emotions rather than by logic. That's my observation. I'd like to hear views on it.
Absolutely beautifully said. And if I can add to that, a couple of things. One, I need to correct this kind of fallacy that erroneously many people think, and I've torn my hair out telling people that, look, this is not the case. Almost everyone I know of, scientists or otherwise, think that Darwin's theory of evolution means survival of the fittest. All of you think that competition is at the heart of survival and those who are the fittest would survive. Nothing could be further than the truth. And Darwin himself was at pains to point this out, that this is only half of the way evolution works. The other half, and there was no word at that point of time during Darwin's time called empathy, so he used the word sympathy. He said humankind has evolved and survived because we have this half endowment of sympathy, of kindness, this so-called milk of human kindness. And it is not without any reason that our human brain has increased its volume 3 times in the last 3 million years. Cognitive abilities, we look after each other, we survive, we adapt. And that is at the core, as much at the core of survival as is being fit and adapting and generating mutations and collecting helpful mutations. So 2 things go hand in hand. And this is a tragedy that when people think of capitalism, they only think of survival of the fittest. And when they think of socialism, they think of this kindness, this empathy and sympathy. And I put to you that capitalism, good moral and ethical capitalism, has got nothing to do with crony capitalism. The fault of capitalism is not crony. Cronism is the fault of crony capitalism, not capitalism. It's the cronies. Capitalism is a beautiful thing. It endows the complete tenets of Darwinian evolution, including survival of the fittest through competition, as well as empathy. We've seen so many, you have corporate social responsibility. You've seen so many steps that modern day capitalists are taking so that their workforce can be more productive. You have creches in organizations now. You have so many incentives in addition to what capitalism brings you. Those are all socially moral and just, ethically just additions that capitalists have added to it. And what can be more moral and ethical to have a productive workforce? And how do you make a productive workforce? By making it healthier, by removing malnutrition, by making it more educated. And no nation can survive, go into the future, if 44% of its labor force is involved in agriculture and most of them haven't been to school, most of them are malnourished, most of them are unhealthy, and therefore most of them are not productive. in any other field except agriculture. And I said, we need a welfare state. I am for a welfare state, except the difference is that a politician thinks that a welfare state can be sustained through socialism. And I say, not just think, I prove it to you, that welfare state is only possible through capitalism. That's the answer.
Before we take the last question, Doctor, and I think no expert, but I've been reading that one thing that people have been struggling to put into artificial intelligence systems is empathy and love. And
Right.
today I'm able to understand a lot more after you just said what you said on empathy and linking it to Darwin. So we'll just take the last question for the evening.
Dr. Anand, it's lovely again hearing you as always. I just have one question.
Sure.
So I know that you started saying that missed opportunities and all these things, but but I still believe that India is the land of opportunity, and there is a lot of opportunities, so we have to stay positive. But I don't want to wait till 2047. I just wanted to add what the gentleman just now said, that are we going to be a 5 trillion economy by 2025 as our Prime Minister visions? And because that also matters, and where we position ourselves as our country and as we move and in the competitive environment with other countries, as you know that there are a lot of challenges, geopolitical and all these things. So India needs to be heard in the global scenario. So which I think our Prime Minister has done a great job, and fully support that. We are still, and I truly believe that we are incredible India, having said whatever we are and whatever we have done, and we can do a lot. So do you think that we can be a 5 trillion economy by 2025 at this rate of growth?
Maybe by 2027, I think COVID put us back by 2 or 3 years. We would be, but then two questions there. I think our government debt is increasing, if I'm not mistaken, the economists amongst you. So we are, right now, we're going really gung-ho on financing infra, and we're taking a lot of debt. Now that is dangerous. That said, I mean, you look at Japan, its debt to GDP ratio is 270%. Ours is, I think, 119%. It's increased. Two things there. One, I mentioned that what matters to me is not just GDP, but GDP per capita. So even if we are a $5 trillion economy in 2027, our GDP per capita would still be $2,100, which is $2,000 now. That's one thing. The other thing that I did not have time to talk about, and if I can just take maybe a minute to talk about, is accountability. What matters why do nations become great? At the heart of it is not only the steps that the politicians take, it is the accountability that the public puts the onus on the politician to have taken that step, congratulated him. Many things Modi has done brilliantly. But then where is the accountability when you talk about things that he has failed, or apno ko hi koste hain, as the proverb goes, kisi aur ko nahi kosta. You know, I will not lecture like this in Pakistan. You know, what's the point? We want to improve. That is why we need to, look at the lacuna that are facing us. And there, one of the biggest thing that in the near future, again, near past, and I'll give you an example. I work by example. So we had Pulwama bombing. Believe it or not, before Pulwama bombing, we had Pakistan as the most favored nation. Some of you would know that, It's tragedy. We had a terror state as a most favored nation. After Pulwama and after Balakot, we stopped all trade with Pakistan. We're not trading, So 20 Jawans were killed. We stopped all trade. 20 Jawans were killed by China in Galwan, right? Our trade with China 2 years down the line has never been higher. Our trade with China is $126 billion. Our trade imbalance is $102 billion deficit. We imported $101 billion from China. Now, where is the accountability when the Prime Minister or someone talks about Atmanirbharta 2 years ago, when China has inflicted this pain on us, when we've acted, when another country inflicted this pain on us? What explains this? On two counts. One, where is the white paper? Especially when we know for a fact, even though I doubt that COVID virus was genetically manufactured by humans, but there is no doubt that it escaped from a Chinese lab. and China allowed it to happen for 2-3 months, Wuhan, people to travel to and fro, and allowed the spread of the virus. So China is responsible for wrecking not only Indian economy, but the world economy. Has it paid for it? Have we made it pay for it? We haven't. Where is the white paper? Where is the white paper where the finance minister would say that there are 200 companies before COVID that were working in China, and we have personally met each and every CEO or CFO of them and have brought them to India? How many of them have been brought back? Where is the white paper and accountability when a government organization, NCML, brings out a white paper of its own saying that 87% of the goods that we procure from China, sourced from China, can be procured from a third country cheaper? This is a government report saying it. And 3 years down the line, we are importing more than ever from China. So, sir, we will become $5 trillion economy. The point is, yes, scientific advancement is all very good, but I personally feel I don't have much time. I want my country to become, $10-20 trillion economy as fast as possible. And we can't do that unless we take cognizance of these things that we are not acting on or we're doing wrong. Yes. And as Keynes said, Keynesian economics, and I love one of the quotes that he said, I hate the long term. In the long term, we're all dead.
It's very hard act to follow after he has spoken with such thunder and eloquence. And I was just talking before he started. We share a common background in IIT Kanpur. I'm an alumnus of IIT Kanpur, and his parents were professors there. No wonder he's flowing with such eloquence.
No.
And I was just wanted to tell that I started working in AI because I realized in IIT Kanpur that my limits of natural intelligence were fairly not much. So that's why I started working in that. Since we talked about 1998, 25 years back, and you'd be surprised that at that time, the IT export out of this country was $4.8 billion. That's it. And today we export more IT services than Saudi Arabia does oil. So you can see how much progress can be made. And I think all of you guys sitting here, and quite a few are very active in this area. Congratulations to all of you. I think some of you would have seeded this sector and grown it. And it's very interesting and important that since we're talking about next 25 years, right? I mean, we are going to go from knowledge economy to intelligence economy, right? By 2030, we're going to have 7.5 billion people connected with 30 billion connected and intelligent machines. And that is a phenomenal opportunity. And I see this from two perspectives. One is that, of course, I've been investing in this area for last quite a few years. I started the first AI-focused venture fund, and we started AI and Robotics Technology Park together with the government. It's a not-for-profit to grow this whole area, and now we are doing a $100 million venture fund focused on AI and robotics. Two things stand out. One is that every single industry is going to be reinvented with AI. How many of you have actually tried ChatGPT? Please raise your hand. Those who have not, please try it. It's very interesting. I mean, I was actually asking this question recently in Y20 event, Youth 20. There are 20s everywhere. And the room was full of college students, and I asked them, because since I'm in the AI bubble most of the time, how many of you are using ChatGPT? And there was not a single one of them did not raise their hand. Every single one of them was using it. And it's very interesting because the era that we are entering, we call it human-like AI, where 65 to 70% of human effort will be actually done through AI. So I feel actually India with 900 million people, it's a great opportunity and also a threat. 18% of global work will actually get automated.
Yeah.
And that's not according to me, according to Goldman Sachs. And so on one hand, we have 900 million people, and we also know that a lot of automation will occur. And if I draw a simple chart, if we keep growing at 7%, we're going to reach 16.3 trillion or so by 2047. So if you have to go to 30 trillion, we would have to latch on to this intelligence economy. There's no other choice for us. I was talking to somebody in the morning. They're one of the largest, food delivery companies, and they reduced their cost of, customer care from 450 crores to less than 200 crores, and they're using GPT-4. Their cost of, the customer resolution ratio is more than 90%, and it's happening now. And the challenge is that, and which is a challenge for India, is that earlier we were paying for oil, but if we don't build this technology here, we'll be also paying for brains, because if 1/4 of whatever you're going to do, you're going to actually give it out. So I think it's an opportunity that we need to build this whole industry, just like we did IT industry. We can build it. We don't have to wait for the government. Government will take its own time. They take time to understand things, and but I think we have enough smart brains here, and we can build it together. That's what I can say. And before I close this off, and I was chatting with him. This century we're going to decline in the whole world by 2 billion people. India is going to peak in 2050 or so, right? So if I see in the long run, we will be building robots to take care of the GDP or things which we may not like to do here. And I see this very clearly, that by 2030, each one of us, and it sounds very logical right now, but each one of us will be actually having a personal bot, physical or digital, to do things which we may not like to do. Right? Maybe I don't like to clean my room. Maybe I might have something to help with. Maybe I might suffer from maybe things that I don't remember things. Maybe there would be a bot to help me remember things. So I think it's very hard, as he pointed out, right, to imagine 25 years from now. And that's where I say that you go back, you ask your kids what are they doing, and how are they leveraging that. And I asked my kids how are they doing that, and they were doing ChatGPT to solve their homework. And they asked me, right, like, why should I go to school? And that's a very relevant question, because it made me question that, okay, what kind of education or learning system that we're building? And that's why it's very important to think that along with building Industry 4.0 in the intelligence economy, which is going to yield $15.7 trillion of new economic value, which is almost like 4 or 5 times the current GDP. It's a massive opportunity. But I think we also need to build Society 4.0. And he touched upon it very briefly when we were talking about it. And what does it mean? It means that fundamentally in the long run, we would have to look at going from money to fulfillment. We may not choose opportunities just based on money alone. We may actually have to start moving in terms of our thinking from scarcity to abundance. Because the Adam Smith talked about the scarcity of resources, and if you're going to have digital or physical bots doing production, not sleeping, working all the time, then there will be a different kind of future that might await us. So we have to think from our thinking would have to shift from scarcity to abundance. We would have to think from job to work. Job is like something externally that we ask people to do, or you do it for fame or money, versus work, which is an expression of yourself. So while we've been learning so far to explore the world outside, we would have to dive deeper and explore the world inside. And the fourth pillar that I seen, and that's where applicable to all of us, we would have to learn, because things will change. And the future is no longer going to be like it was in the past. And the only way to thrive in that is to learn. So thanks a lot, Dr. Anand.
Thank you very much.
It's a pleasure having you here.
If I may take, I hate this. But this time I really want to take 30 seconds. Because I remembered a wonderful anecdote, or a joke rather, that an NRI was, rushing past the fields of Punjab in a car, and suddenly there was a puncture and the car stopped, and the NRI got out and he looked around, and there was a guy who was sleeping on a cot under a tree. So he wakes him up and says, "Arey bhai, ye puncture banao." So the guy is mending the puncture and he says कि कहाँ तुम वियामान में बैठे हुए हो ऐसे ही सो रहे हो पेड़ के नीचे, थोड़ा सा दुकान खोलो थोड़ी दूर जाके, पंचर की दुकान खोलो. कहता फिर क्या होगा उससे कि फिर वहाँ पे 2-3 लोगों को एम्प्लॉय करना, फिर एक गराज बनाओगे, फिर क्या होगा, फिर उसके बाद तुम्हारी प्रॉस्पेरिटी बढ़ेगी, खाना आएगा ज़्यादा, इनकम बढ़ेगी, 3-4 लोग और हायर करोगे, फिर क्या होगा. कहता फिर आराम से खटिया पे सोना उसके नीचे. तो कहता साले वही तो कर रहा था मैं. So I think we're going to turn full circle.
Yeah, in this century itself. Yeah. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.